Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnu Pada Paramahansa Parivrajikacharya Stotara Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Chekaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Shri Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai. Shri Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai. Jamuna Maya Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Shama Beta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Narayanam namaskritam naram chaivam narottamam devim sarasatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye nasta prayeshu avadeshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati utamashloke bhakti bhavati naistiki. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 3rd chapter, text number 8. Is that right? Asham Muhurta Ekasmin Nanagareshu Yoshitam Sabidam Jagre Panin Anurupa Sva Mayaya Asamahurtam Ekasmin Nanagarashu Yoshitam Savidam Jarge Panin Anurupaha Svamayaya Asamahurta Ekasmin Nanagareshu Yoshitam Savidam Jagre Panin Anurupa Svamayaya Asam, all these. Muhurte, at one time. Ekasmin, simultaneously. Nana agareshu, in different compartments. Yoshitam, of the women. Savidam, with perfect rituals. Jagre, accepted. Panin, hands. Anurupa, exactly to match. Samayaya, by his internal potency. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. All those princesses were lodged in different apartments, and the Lord simultaneously assumed different expansions, exactly matching each and every princess, accepted their hands in perfect rituals by his internal potency. All those princesses were lodged in different apartments, and the Lord simultaneously assumed different bodily expansions, exactly matching each and every princess. He accepted their hands in perfect rituals by his internal potency. Purport. In the Brahma Samhita 5.33, the Lord is described as follows in regard to his innumerable plenary expansions. Advaitam, Achutam, Anadim, Ananta, Rupam, Adyam, Purana, Purusham, Navayovanam cha. Vedeshu Durlabhayam, Adurladbhayam, Atma Bhakto, Govindamadi Purusham, Tamaham Bhajami. Open quote. The Lord whom I worship is the original personality of Godhead. He is non-different from his innumerable plenary expansions, who are all infallible, original, unlimited, and who have eternal forms. Although he is primeval, the oldest personality, he is always fresh and young. Close quote. By his internal potency, the Lord can expand himself into various personalities, as Svayam, Prakasha, and again into Prabhava, and Vaibhava forms. And all of them are different from one another. The forms into which the Lord expanded to marry the princesses in different apartments were all slightly different, just to match each and every one of them. They are called Vaibhava Vilas forms of the Lord, and are effected by his internal potency, Yogamaya. Om Gyana Timiram Dasya Jana Salakaya Chaksur Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Pachalam Pongam Langaya Tegidam Yatkri Patadaham Bande Shri Gurudina Tarane. This is evidence that God is omnipotent and that he can do anything and dress any way and make himself look like anything. It's mentioned that Narada Muni was very astonished when he visited the Lord to see his 16,000 plus different palaces in which he was doing something differently in each palace. Yogis have the ability to expand themselves several times, but they do the same thing all the time in wherever they are, whereas with Krishna he was doing something different. So this astonished Narada, who came to visit Krishna, when he saw that he was in each palace he was doing something different. That's the nature of God. He's omnipotent, he can do anything, anywhere, anything, anywhere. So there's a little difference between an expansion and an incarnation. And Prabhupada talks about these vilasas and swayam pavasas and prabhava. The Lord can expand himself in many ways. He's just that's the meaning of an omnipotent. It's not that it's said that in Vishwanath Chakravarti's prayer that the spiritual master is as good as the Supreme Lord, but he's different. He's as good but different in a way, because the Lord has a different kind of omnipotence. We individually we may have some degree of omnipotence. We can maybe there's people that can read minds, and we don't know how many hairs are on our heads, whether we're shaved or not. It doesn't matter. In 1976, after getting permission from Prabhupada, I returned from Bhaktivedanta Manor to Los Angeles. Not returned, but just went there. I moved there. And around about the 18th, I got a telephone call from a devotee that I knew of, but I didn't know. Her name was Kamala. And she told me a little bit of a long story. I was 35 years old and she was 18 years old, so I didn't have much to do with her. But she said that her parents had invited her to her house. But she was a little bit worried because she thought that because they hadn't visited her and they thought that she was a strange character, that it wouldn't be a good idea. So, but at the time she was betrothed, or she had a fiancé, and I told her that if you go, that the two of you go and you don't separate under any circumstances, you never part company, then I think it'll be all right. And so that was the end of that conversation. And I sort of hung up the phone, and that was that. And then I didn't think about it anymore. And then about 3 days later, Ramachandra phoned me, and he said, his first words were, Kamala has been kidnapped. And I was kind of taken aback because I didn't think that there was such a thing as a devotee being kidnapped. I mean, I heard of kidnapping, but I didn't know what it was. But then he told me the whole story, that that the two of them had gone up to their parents' house, or Kamala's parents' house, and the mother came to the door, and she looked right at the husband, and she said, "Can I just have a few private words with my daughter, because her grandmother is ill?" And so he being sort of compliant and obedient, he agreed to do it. He went back to his car, which was not far away, about 40 meters away, and not that far. Anyway, this was what Ramachandra was telling me over the telephone. And then as he looked up to see what was going on, he saw that his wife-to-be was coming out of the house. And just as she was stepping out of the front door, she was grabbed from behind by people in the house. And he didn't know who they were, but these hands and arms came around her and pulled her back in. So he went down to his car to phone Rameshwar, and he found that the car was disabled. So apparently someone in the house, while they were had walked up to the front door, had disabled the car, had pulled out the distributor wires or something, so he couldn't drive. So he had to walk, and he walked to the nearest. And this is a place called Arcadia. It's a suburb of Pasadena, California. It's like a very conservative middle-class neighborhood, and it was hard to find a phone. But he finally found a phone in a phone booth and told Rameshwar what had happened. And that's why he said that this person had been kidnapped. And so then the whole scene went into high gear because it was unusual that a devotee was kidnapped. So Ramachandra and I drove to the scene, and his car was out there, and he figured out what was wrong with it and opened the hood and got it started and put it all together. And then we had a sort of a tag team arrangement whereby there was always a car in front of the house, but the house now was black. There was no light inside. It was getting dark. It was a Saturday night, and it was 23rd of October, and it was starting to get a bit dark out. So Rameshwar and I did the first sort of vigil and watched the house, the darkened house, and we didn't know what was going on. She was grabbed and brought into this house, and it was all dark. And then finally we just decided, okay, well, we're going to leave here, and then we called for another car to come and take over the vigil to watch the house, so that there was no sort of time when the house wasn't being watched, this black house. And on the way back to the New Dwarka Temple, we stopped at the newspaper called the Los Angeles Times, which was, I think it's the biggest or third biggest newspaper in the United States. And because it was a Saturday night, there was nobody there. And so we pulled into the parking lot at the basement. And the only person there was one man who was manning the kiosk. He was like some general manager for the parking lot. He said, "Well, Saturday night, if you don't want to see anyone, no one's here. They've all gone home. But if you want, you can try, and you can go up to. I think the reporters are all on the 7th floor. And so we went up to the 7th floor, the two of us." And that floor was just a bunch of empty desks, except for one desk. One desk had a man sitting behind it, and his name was Michael Levitt. And so we thought, well, let's talk with him and tell him the story. And so we told him the story, what we knew about it. And it so happened that this Michael Levitt knew one other thing that happened before we got to Los Angeles Times, I wanted to mention. We went to the Arcadia is a suburb of Pasadena. It's a very small and conservative town. So we went to their police station, and we told the police. This is before we went to the Los Angeles Times. We told the police what had happened, and they said, well, if she had been our daughter, we wouldn't have taken it seriously or something like that. So we went to a phone booth in the police station, and we phoned our lawyer because it was Saturday night. It was getting to be about 7 o'clock. It was getting dark. And he said that you have to file a complaint, a written complaint to the police, even though they don't want to take it, but it has to be done in triplicate. So we went all over the town of Arcadia to find a place that was still open, that had pencils and papers. And finally, after looking high and low, we found a place that had pencils and paper. It was a big market, and in the stationery section, they had pencils and pencil sharpeners, which we needed, and paper. So we went back to nearby the police station, parked our car, and filled out this complaint in triplicate. It was actually done in triplicate. And then when we finished the whole thing, it took a lot of pressure to make 3 copies. We went back to the police station, and they begrudgingly took our complaint. It was a complaint of a kidnapping. So then we went. Then it was really getting dark, and we went back to the Los Angeles Times, and we saw this one man that he knew our lawyer. He said that he had been a lawyer before, and he said, that's a very interesting story. I think I'm going to write something about this in the Los Angeles Times. So we thought, okay, it's Saturday night. He's probably not going to do it tonight, but we went back to the temple, and the vigil was still in force. Still in force. So then the next morning, Sunday morning, the BBT had a meeting of 5 or 6 or 7 people, and the meeting turned into, we summoned the people that worked in the art department to make posters, because we had asked our lawyer if we could make some kind of a protest before this darkened house, and he said, yeah. He said, you can walk up and down as long as you don't go into the street or close to the house. You have to be a certain distance away from the curb. It's legal to be a certain distance away from the curb. And I have a picture of the protest that went on. I'm going to pass this around. Anyone who wants to can keep it. This article appeared in the Los Angeles Times on the front page on Monday, the 25th of October. And it's got, as you see, it's got a nice picture and an article in it. So, and the very sleepy little town of Arcadia was kind of awakened to see all these protesters walking on the front lawn of the Slavin House. And it was a Sunday morning, and they just didn't know what to think. What was going on? Who are these strange people walking back and forth with placards? Because the art department they made, according to our direction, they made posters. They were big posters, about 1 meter high and about 2/3 of a meter wide, and they were saying things like, the Slavins are torturing we don't know what's going on. The Slavins, are they torturing their daughter, or is there no religious freedom in Arcadia? Stuff like that. So the picture tells the story. So we were walking up and down, and so then the Arcadia police would come by in their sort of routine checks and look at us and kind of wave, but they didn't do anything. And then finally, another unmarked car drove up, and a man got out, and he introduced himself as Lieutenant Ostler. He said that he had worked for the Boston police before, and he had moved to California, and he had had a dispute with the Boston police, and therefore he was much better situated in this place. And then we told him the story, and we told him all about Kamala, and he said, "Oh, so this is a religion," and he kind of took our side. He said that this is a kidnapping case. And so he said, I'm going to find out, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And then so he left the whole thing. And this became a very high-profile case. Ramachandra and I went to the local TV news people and asked them if they would get involved, and they were very happy to get involved. They went to the door and knocked on the door of the dark house, and no one answered. And so this was a broadcast on the evening news that this woman had vanished, and she had been apparently kidnapped by people in the house. So then we found out what really happened. What really happened was she'd gone into the house, and the first thing she said was, "Where's Granny?" And then the parents and the sister's husband told her that actually Granny's in the hospital. We'll have to go and see her. She's in the intensive care ward. And then she knew that something wasn't right. Something fishy was going on. So she started to leave, to go out the door, and that's when they all grabbed her from behind. Her brother-in-law, her sister, her mother, her father, and whoever else was there. And they went out the back way. There's a back entrance of the house, and went into a loaded van. And there were deprogrammers waiting for her in the loaded van. And they threw a sort of a blanket affair over her and sat her so she couldn't move. And her brother-in-law was there, her sister, her mother, and her father were all in the van. And they drove about 400 kilometers north to a place called Calistoga, California, where there was a house, a relative's house, and these 2 deprogrammers who were imported from somewhere in Pennsylvania, which is on the other side of the country. It's about 1,400 kilometers away. It's really a long ways away. And so they did their typical. This is over a period of about 4 days. They tried to convince her that she was a victim of brainwashing, and finally she thought the only thing that she could do to escape these people is to pretend that she had been deprogrammed. So she was a very good actress, and she convinced the two girls that were deprogramming her. They were older than she was. They were in their late 20s, and she was 18 years old. She said, "Well, I just have to go for a walk and clear my head." And so she went for a little bit of a walk. It was kind of a rural location. And as soon as she got out of sight of the house, she made a run for it. And of course, I'm not telling this story exactly, so there may be some versions that are a little different. But apparently, she went out, she ran and ran and ran, and over the hill and then down the hill, and it was all grassy, and there was a road, and the first car that she saw was a police car, and she ran away into a ditch and hid from the police car because she thought the police were in on this whole kidnapping thing. So then the police car just drove by, and then she went back to the grass area, and saw a strange house and knocked on the door and told them what happened, but she wasn't sure whether they were in in on it with her parents and all that. But anyway, they let her make a phone call. She said, "Can I use your telephone?" So she made a telephone call to the Arcadia police and told them what happened, and they believed her. So as a result, either they, in a private plane, or they contacted, I think, the Los Angeles police in a private airplane. They flew her back to her Los Angeles community home. And this was kind of late at night, and we learned about this all the next morning. It was getting sort of late in the day. It was getting late in the week. It was getting to be Thursday. And everyone was ecstatic that Kamala had returned. She had been back, and she told the whole story about what had happened. And then, being not people to just look the other way, we decided to file a court action called a habeas corpus action. And the habeas corpus is Latin for the hidden body, or find the body. So it was a very packed courtroom, and the court assembled on the Friday. This all happened over the week before on a Saturday, and the courtroom was packed with people. There were deprogrammers, there were Scientologists, there was Robin George family, all kinds of people, but they wouldn't let anyone from the media in. They had to wait outside with their TV cameras and scroll papers and all that. They weren't let in. The only people that were allowed in were people that could sketch the defendants and people in the courtroom. And when the parents who were summoned, they were subpoenaed to take the witness stand. They all, their answer to all the questions was, "I refuse to answer on the grounds that it may incriminate me." It looked like they were guilty because they actually were, but by saying that, it made them look even more guilty. So then after about 2 hours, the court session was adjourned, and Kama and her fiance walked out the door, and there were about 20 media people all waiting eagerly to ask them what had happened. And they walked with them down to the end of the corridor where the elevators were, and then they got out. So that's the story. Then, not to look the other way, we filed another action against the parents. They were each fined $100, and it was done on a Saturday night when there was no media available, and they were kind of slapped on the wrist. And then Kamala made another lawsuit with the help of devotees, and this time she won the case, and she won $10,000. The deprogrammers were ordered to pay $10,000 plus court costs and legal fees, which probably amounted to close to $15,000 at the time. So they kind of learned their lesson the hard way, and that's the end of the story. Any comments or questions? Okay. Yes?
Yes, Maharaj. I'd like to comment that just the mood of care and love the devotees have for each other is illustrated in the story, the extent of finding the lost devotee and all of the effort. Just appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a very mysterious thing to see this darkened house. And we didn't know there was a back door. And so it was the first time anything like this had ever happened in New Dwarka. So that's why there was a constant vigil of different cars coming one after the other to watch the darkened house. But anyway, it did show that devotees care for one another, because that was quite risky. But the court found that the deprogrammers were in the wrong. And that whole phenomena has died out now, this deprogramming phenomena. It started up in Europe, but then it's kind of died out. Yes?
I was just wondering if Srila Prabhupada found out and what he said.
He probably found out, and I don't know what he said, but he knew that there was a movement against our movement, and he knew who was behind it, and so it didn't come as a great shock to him. I mean, I didn't know what he said, and if any of you want to see this story, I told it on the late morning program podcast by Namarasa. And this is the leaflet that he made, and I'm going to hand this out if you want to. You can see past issues, and if you want to see, and it's probably more detailed and more correct. That's what happened. Yeah, it was in 1976 when she had the news conference where she got a lot of money, and I mean they were ordered to pay $15,000. That was a lot of money in those days. So anything else? Yes.
Guruji, do you think that Krishna helped you orchestrate the whole thing? I mean, the defense.
Well, I think that the whole incident made the movement a lot more prominent because it was very high profile. And it wasn't more than a couple of months after that, there was another deprogramming case in which a Queen's appellate judge ruled in favor of ISKCON. He said that the Hare Krishna movement has roots in India that go back thousands of years, and when it appeared on the front page of the New York Times and the front page of the Times of India, and when it was read to Prabhupada, he said that, well, what I thought was going to take 10 years took only 2 years, something like that. He was just amazed, and that was the turning point, sort of thing, of acceptance of Hare Krishna in the United States. This judge was a very powerful judge, and his article, his judgment appeared on the front page of the New York Times. Anything else? Okay, we'll stop there. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.